Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 682, and today is October 3rd, 2024. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. We don't have a ton of news on today's show, but a couple important stories and a little bit of analysis I want to get into. So be sure to share today's show. It's hosted at the Libertarian Institute. We repost the show on the blog at antiwar.com. YouTube, Rumble, or Odysee for the video version of the show. Of course, it's up anywhere you could listen to audio podcasts. And of course, the best place to follow me to find all my work is on Twitter at Kyle and Anzalone_. Additionally, you can support the show by supporting our sponsor, and that is the Expat Money Summit 2024. It's the world's largest offshore event. It's taking place entirely online, and it's happening next week, October 7th through the 11th. And so if you would like a complimentary ticket to the event, head on over to expatmoneysummit.com. Again, that's expatmoneysummit.com. Or follow through from the link in the show notes page. That way they know that you got sent from Conflicts of Interest. Additionally, if you want a VIP ticket to the event, use the promo code Kyle, Kyle, when you check out. I will be appearing on one of the VIP panel events. Myself, Dave DeCamp, and Hervoya Morik will be discussing World War III. Is it fear-mongering or a genuine concern? So be sure to check all of this out in the show notes page. Check out the Expat Money Summit. If you want to attend, go ahead and get your ticket. I know quite a few of you have already done that through the show's link, and I really do appreciate it. Now let's get into the show. All right, as with the rest of the week, we got one story on Russia here before we get into the news in the Middle East. Russia says nuclear arms control talks with U.S. not possible unless U.S. changes hostile policy. So Russia said on Monday that it was not possible to hold nuclear arms control talks with the U.S. unless Washington changes its highly hostile policy towards Moscow. So this is a statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. She said, "We see no point in engaging in strategic dialogue with Washington unless it involves comprehensive efforts to reduce overall conflict levels, respect Russia's fundamental interests, and focus on resolving the fundamental security contradictions created by the United States and NATO." She made the comments when asked about the possibility of Russia and the U.S. holding potential talks on a treaty to replace New START, the last arms control treaty between the two powers, which is due to expire in 2026. Russia suspended its participation in New START last year in response to a Ukrainian drone attack on a facility housing Russian nuclear weapons, which Moscow said was supported by the US and NATO. NATO sources told the Asia Times that the Ukrainian drones use US satellite and GPS data to hit their targets. While Russia suspended its participation in New START, both the US and Russia are still complying with the limits of the treaty set on deployments of nuclear warheads, which is capped at 1,550. A Russian source told a Russian newspaper that Moscow would not sign another New START treaty. The source said, "We have suspended our participation in the New START treaty because of Washington's actions, and we will not sign any new agreement, as doing so would only inflate the ego of the U.S." The collapse of the New START came after Trump administration pulled out of two other arms control treaties, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which banned medium-range land-based missile systems, and the Open Skies Treaty, which allowed unarmed surveillance flights over participating countries. Russia tried to salvage both treaties, offering the Biden administration an offer to restore open skies and a memorandum on the deployment of INF range missiles in Europe. The administration rebuffed both offers, and the U.S. recently announced plans to deploy previously banned launchers by the INF treaty to Germany in 2026. All right, let's move on here. And I would like to discuss my Libertarian Institute debrief from yesterday. I titled this one, "So Now It's Terror." After a year of Israel relentlessly bombing civilian targets in Gaza, the West Bank, and Lebanon, some members of the American political class have decided the new outbreak of violence in the Middle East is an unacceptable form of terrorism. For the past year, Netanyahu has ordered bombings of Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. Additionally, Tel Aviv killed Hamas's two top negotiators by assassination in Beirut and Tehran. Israel has killed tens of thousands of civilians, including hundreds of infants in Gaza. Doctors have been rounded up and tortured to death. Journalists have been targeted in hundreds of airstrikes. This was all done with U.S. money, American weapons, and the White House's unconditional support. The policy has received little criticism from within the Washington Beltway. However, on Tuesday, America's political class found something to be outraged about. Tehran ordered a missile strike on multiple Israeli military targets. At least one civilian was killed by shrapnel from a falling intercepted missile. Additionally, two Palestinian murdered, 7 Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank. Look, I'm anti-war. I don't support the Iranian attacks on Israel, and I certainly think the killing of innocents is atrocious. But I also understand those killings in their larger context, the boiling over of hatred after a year-long Washington-supported mass slaughter campaign. Senator Lindsey Graham responded to the attacks by calling the Iranians Nazis and said the missile attack should represent a breaking point, and requested an overwhelming response targeting Iranian oil facilities. This is a tweet. For those of you watching the show, you can see the tweet here. For those of you just listening, I will go ahead and read this thing. He said, "This is a moment of choosing for the free world regarding Iran. The Ayatollah and the Iranian regime are religious Nazis who want to destroy the state of Israel. Their words, not mine." I don't think the Iranians have ever referred to themselves as Nazis. They want to purify Islam and attack the United States. Again, their words, not mine. I don't think Iran has ever wanted to attack the United States. This missile attack against Israel should be the breaking point, and I would urge the Biden administration to coordinate an overwhelming response with Israel, starting with Iran's ability to refine oil. These oil refineries need to be hit hard, and hit hard because that is the source of cash for the regime to perpetuate their terror. My prayers are with the people of Israel, and may God continue to bless Israel. So this is the statement from Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris, and she restated that she would continue to provide Israel with arms and threaten to attack Iran. So this is Kamala Harris's statement. Iran is destabilizing, dangerous force in the Middle East, and today's attacks on Israel only demonstrate that fact. As I have said, I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist militias. My commitment to the security of Israel is unwavering, and let me be clear, Iran is not only a threat to Israel, Iran is also a threat to American personnel in the region. American interests and innocent civilians across the region who suffer at the hands of Iran-based and based terrorist proxies. We will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend U.S. forces and interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists, and we'll continue to work with our allies and partners to disrupt Iran's aggressive behavior and hold them accountable. Congressman Mike Lawler added his name to the list of Republicans calling for the U.S. to attack Iran. He said, "May God watch over Israel. Time for an appeasement of the Ayatollah and his regime of terror is over. Iran's brazenly attacking civilians and military targets within Israel necessitates a response by Israel, the U.S., and our strategic partners within the borders of Iran." And you even have libertarian Liz Wolfe adding her name to that list. She recounts the tragic story of an Israeli who was gunned down, but does Liz ever grant Arabs or Palestinians, more specifically, the same level of humanity? Of course not. And so, you know, what she points out here is that one of the victims, one of the 7 Israeli settlers killed by the 2 Palestinians, was a woman who was holding her 9-month-old baby. And certainly that is terrible, as she talks about how Ari is not going to grow up without a mother. But you know, again, 710 Palestinian children under the age of 1 in Gaza have been killed over the past year in the Israeli bombardment. And so to not humanize any of those Palestinians, right? That's just Israel fighting against terrorists. And so they're just doing what they have to do. And it's actually the terrorists' fault because they're hiding behind the babies, right? This is actually something, speaking of just atrocious libertarians, or people who call themselves libertarians, Walter Block said this in his debate with Dave Smith on the Tom Woods show. And I would have lost my mind if I were Tom or Dave when he said this. But he actually uses a meme of, it says, oh, look, here's this meme of Hamas holding an infant on their lap. This is how they fight. And this is why all the children are dying. And it's a cartoon meme, but this is what the people think are basically going on in Gaza, that members of Hamas are walking around with babies strapped on them. And every time Israel has to take out a member of Hamas to save their own troops, you know, infants are dying in that, when that's not the case at all. And so, you know, it's really ridiculous, and it's just propaganda to now roll out this terrorism narrative. And as libertarians, we oppose state violence and breaking the non-aggression principle against individuals. And so, of course, the killing of the Israelis was wrong. But what is more important is to be unwavering in your opposition to aggression that is waged with American tax dollars. And of course, nobody I highlighted, you know, Wolf, Lawler, Harris, or Graham ever care about any of the aggression happening with the American tax dollars that's fueling so much of the other problems. All right, next up here, let's move into some news on the Middle East. This one from our friend Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. Lebanese foreign minister says Nasrallah agreed to ceasefire right before Israel killed him. So the Lebanese foreign minister, that's Abdallah Bou Habib, said that Hezbollah Secretary General Nasrallah agreed to a French and U.S. proposed 21-day ceasefire with Israel right before the Israelis killed him. He said that the U.S. and France, he said that the U.S. and France told Lebanon that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also agreed to that ceasefire proposal. So this is what was said. They told us that Mr. Netanyahu agreed on this, and so we got agreement from Hezbollah on that, and you know what happened since then. So on September 25th, the U.S., France, and several other nations released a joint statement calling for an immediate 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon to give time to reach a diplomatic solution on the Israel-Lebanon border and to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. The following day, Netanyahu arrived in New York for the UN General Assembly and rejected rumors that Israel had agreed to the truce. The U.S. officials told the media that they coordinated the ceasefire proposal with Israel and were frustrated with Netanyahu rejecting it. But the U.S. put no real pressure on Israel to agree to the ceasefire, and the same day Netanyahu rejected it, Israel announced it had secured another $8.7 billion in military aid from Washington. So on Friday, September 27th, Netanyahu ordered the massive airstrike that killed Nasrallah from a hotel in New York following his address to the UN. Israeli officials told ABC News they decided to kill Nasrallah because he wouldn't negotiate a diplomatic solution without a ceasefire in Gaza, which now appears to be somewhat incorrect anyways. And this again adds to the Israeli trend where they killed Ismail Haniyeh and another top Hamas negotiator who was living in Beirut earlier in the war. He's actually the one that negotiated the 1-week ceasefire and prisoner swap back in November. They killed him, and then they killed Haniyeh. And so Israel is pretty clearly killing anyone who's willing to come to a deal with them because, as I've said, Netanyahu does not want to stop the conflict, at least not before the election. He wants all these wars going and expanded as far as possible because he knows that the U.S. is just going to compete for who could support Israel more. And so the more support Israel needs, the more support that they're going to get. Next up here, Hezbollah fights Israeli forces in Lebanon, at least 8 Israeli troops killed. So this is from October 7th. Israel said Wednesday that 8 of its soldiers had been killed fighting in Hezbollah on the ground in South Lebanon as the Israeli invasion is underway. The IDF said troops were killed in a gun battle with Hezbollah in a village in southern Lebanon. The Israeli soldiers were commandos of the elite Igaz unit, and their squad commander was among those killed. According to Reuters, the military said that regular troops in armored divisions would be joining the commandos in the fight in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah also said that its forces destroyed 3 Israeli tanks near Miran al-Raz, a Lebanese town just 1 kilometer from the Israeli border. Later in the day, Al Jazeera reported that Hezbollah said its forces surveilled an Israeli unit near Kafr Khalil, another border town, and they detonated explosives in a building where the Israeli troops were located. Hezbollah claimed all members of the Israeli unit were killed, but didn't specify how many. Hezbollah has said its forces were able to repel Israeli troops from advancing in other areas of southern Lebanon. The Israeli casualties show that Hezbollah is putting up stiff resistance against the Israeli force despite the massive Israeli airstrikes that have been hitting Lebanon for more than a week. And while Israel maybe doesn't have full air superiority over southern Lebanon in the same sense that, say, they do in Gaza, they do pretty much have air superiority here. I would imagine, particularly near the border, anywhere south of Beirut, they really would have the ability to. I mean, not that maybe there isn't some anti-aircraft, anti-missile systems, anti-drone systems that can be used by Hezbollah, but I would guess there's not that many. There's not advanced radar systems. And so you would think that Israel would really have near carte blanche to hit all the Hezbollah positions they want with airstrikes, and still the Hezbollah fighters are putting up a pretty solid resistance. Now, my guess is a part of this is Hezbollah has understood these dynamics for some time and has prepared to fight Israel in this method without having the air defenses that, say, you would see in a conflict like the Ukraine war. So the U.S. backed Israel's decision to invade southern Lebanon, insisting it would be a limited operation aimed at removing Hezbollah from positions near the border. Publicly, the U.S. has called for a ceasefire in Lebanon, but a report from Politico revealed White House officials were privately encouraging Israel to escalate its attacks on the country. And so, it seems the U.S. is really 100% signed on to this massive escalation, and we have another one coming. Israel planning major attack on Iran. This one from Day to Camp, antiwar.com, October 2nd. Israel is planning to launch a significant retaliation attack against Iran over the Iranian missile barrage that targeted Israel on Tuesday, which was a response to several Israeli escalations in the region. Israeli officials acknowledged to Axios that the situation could lead to a full-blown regional war, which would involve the U.S. According to the Axios report, Israel could target Iranian oil production facilities inside Iran or other strategic sites. Israeli officials say that if Iran hits back, then all options will be on the table, including strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. So the Israeli official told Axios, "We have a big question mark about how the Iranians are going to respond to an attack, but we take into consideration the possibility that they would go all in, which would be a whole different ball game," the official said. Other options are still being considered, are attacks on Iran's air defenses or targeted assassinations. Israel has a history of killing people inside Iran, including the July 31st assassination of Hamas's political chief, Ismail Haniyeh. So Israel would likely need U.S. military support to launch significant strikes on Iranian territory, and the Israeli officials speaking to Axios say they are coordinating with the Biden administration. Israel wants more U.S. support if it provokes another Iranian attack. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Tuesday that the U.S. would work with Israel to ensure Iran faces severe consequences. President Biden also said he's working with Israel on a response, but said Wednesday that he wouldn't support strikes on Iran's nuclear facility. So this is from Biden. "All 7 of us agree that they have a right to respond, but they have to respond proportionately. He said, referring to the group of 7 nations, he said G7 leaders agreed to impose new sanctions on Iran, which will have little impact since Iran is already under so many. Israel acknowledged on Wednesday that the Iranian missiles may impact on several military bases, but claimed there was no significant damage. Israel is also claiming there were no major casualties, with only 2 Israelis suffering minor injuries. 1 Palestinian man was killed in the Israeli-occupied West Bank when shrapnel from an intercepted missile hit him. Iran fired about 180 ballistic missiles at Israel in response to the Israeli assassination of Haniyeh in Tehran, the Israeli killing of Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, and Abbas Nilfarsahan, an IRGC commander who was killed alongside Nasrallah. All right. And we have Israel escalating in Gaza. Israel escalates strikes on Gaza, slaughters dozens of Palestinians. So Israel ramped up its strikes on Gaza overnight on Tuesday into Wednesday, slaughtering dozens of Palestinians. Citing Palestinian medical sources, Middle East Eye reports that 79 Palestinians were killed Wednesday morning, making it one of the deadliest mornings in weeks for Gaza. The health ministry said Wednesday that at least 51 Palestinians were killed in the previous 24-hour period, a total that only includes dead and wounded people who arrived at the hospital or morgues and doesn't count those buried under the rubble. The ministry said the latest violence brought the recorded death toll since October 7th to 41,689, and another 165 were injured, bringing the total of wounded to 96,625. Israeli strikes on Wednesday included attacks on Gaza City, which targeted a school and an orphanage that were both sheltering displaced Palestinians. According to Middle East Eye, at least 25 people were killed in the 2 strikes, including women and children. Israel also ramped up attacks on the southern city of Khan Yunis on Tuesday night that involved tank raids. Reuters reported that 40 Palestinians were killed and dozens were wounded in the Israeli operations in Khan Yunis. The latest massacre in Gaza is come as the world's attention is on Israel's escalations in Lebanon and the Iranian missile attack on Israel. The regional escalations put much less scrutiny on Israel's genocidal war in Gaza, and Netanyahu is reportedly considering a full-on ethnic cleansing in northern Gaza. In September, Gaza's health ministry released the names of 34,344 Palestinians who have been killed by Israeli forces, including the names of 11,355 children. Among them are 710 infants who didn't make it to their first birthday. All right, last story up here today, this one from Jason Ditz, antiwar.com. Israeli airstrikes killed 3 civilians in residential Damascus. So Israeli forces carried out an airstrike in the upscale Meza neighborhood in the Syrian capital of Damascus today. At least 3 civilians were killed when the strike hit a residential building. Details are still emerging, but Israeli media are claiming that the residential neighborhood was frequented by Hezbollah and Iran's IRGC. 2 of the 3 slain civilians were said to be non-Syrians. It is unclear from reports on why the neighborhood was targeted, but it's the second strike on the neighborhood in as many days. Yesterday's strikes killed at least 6 people, including 3 civilians. A Syrian state media anchor woman was among those killed yesterday. A number of civilians were also reported wounded in today's attack, with figures conflicting into either 3 or 4 wounded. None of today's casualties have yet been identified. Israel has been carrying out a soaring number of attacks against its neighbors in the past weeks and killed a huge number of people, including a lot of civilians in neighboring Lebanon. The escalations by Israel have been ongoing for nearly the entire year, with the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attack as the start of the invasion of the Gaza Strip. Enormous numbers of people have been killed in the Gaza Strip since then, and there is no sign the conflict is ending anytime soon. All right, everybody, that's where I'm going to wrap it up today. Keeping it a little on the short side, I got quite a busy day here. I will be on with Scott Horton later today. I'm not sure if that's going to come out tomorrow or sometime over the weekend, but be sure to subscribe to the Libertarian Institute All podcast feed or the Scott Horton Show, and you will definitely find that episode. And additionally, I am recording that panel for the Expat Money Show next week today. And so if you haven't gotten your ticket yet and you want to see that panel, get your ticket. I think it's going to be a good time. I'm really looking forward to the conversation with Dave and Hervoya, and I think we're going to have a lot of interesting things to say, a lot of great insights. And so, if you want to attend the event, if you got the money to do it, you can. At least you don't have to travel to it, so there's no flights, there's no hotels, there's no meals. You just sit at your laptop at home, you cook yourself some food, and get a ticket to a great conference. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Back with one more episode this week tomorrow.